I'm Mike
Much.
Kelly, and this is Project Healing Waters Omaha Fly Tying Thursday. Tonight we're going to be doing a Muddler Minnow. The Muddler Minnow was created by Don Gapin from Anoka, Minnesota in 1936. It was tied to represent a bait fish in the Nipigon River in Ontario that flows into Lake Superior. The river was once legendary for huge brook trout, but several dams have been constructed over the years that changed the fishery. The current world record brook trout was caught there in 1915. It was officially recognized as a 14 and a half pound fish, but when caught, they reported it as a 20-pound fish. In that time, without refrigeration, the angler was unable to preserve it on the journey to Toronto for certification. So if it lost about 6 pounds in the trip there, I bet it looked pretty nasty by the time it got there. It's said that after he watched the First Nations guides catch sculpins for bait, and they explained their importance as forage for the large trout, that he tied his first muddler by lantern light in his camp using materials from a portable tying kit. As with many fly patterns of the time, the muddler was popularized by Dan Bailey, and it became popular all over the world. So it's normally tied on a 3X or 4X long hook, just a standard large nymph hook or a streamer hook. Size 2 to 12. When you start getting smaller than a 12, the materials just don't lend you to be able to tie it. You have to get creative with using different materials. The tail and the wing are mottled turkey wing quill, and it's pretty difficult to find the real good oak mottled stuff like you see in this picture on the upper left there. The body is gold flat tinsel ribbed with fine oval tinsel. A lot of people nowadays use the diamond braid, the different braid materials. Some of them are flat that you can wrap on the hook and make a real nice looking body. The underwing is gray squirrel, and the head and the collar are deer hair spun and clipped. Now the real pretty one that's up in the upper left corner there, you can see the head is perfectly formed, real tightly packed deer hair. And again, this fly was created to represent sculpin minnows, which hang out on the bottom. So this fly is probably not going to sink to the bottom very easily without using lead. So it really doesn't. If you want to use this as a sculpin pattern, you'd want to use it more as the original looked and not have as tightly packed of a head. If you wanted to use this as a hopper, or have the capability to use it as a hopper or a stonefly, you could leave the tie him with a more tightly packed head like that, and that will give you more flotation. So the original, this is one of the, actually tied by Don Gapin, apparently. You can see that the head is clipped, but it's not nearly as pronounced and as tightly packed as as a lot of the ones that you see sold today. So in a case like this with the looser packed hairs, you're still going to get the bulk of a minnow-shaped head, but the spaces in the hair will allow it to sink a little more readily and be able to be used subsurface. But with all the deer hair, in that in this fly, again, I always talk about flies that are easy to be fished very slowly in still water. This is a good fly that you could use in shallow water over spawning beds for freshwater fish. um, in shallow water for trout, and you can just move it very, very slowly. Um, in a stream, you could weight it to get it down. So this is eventually where we want to go. Add a little bit of light here. And so the materials I'll go to the materials camera and explain kind of what I'm doing here. For the regular standard muddler, you won't use marabou or um, like a hackle fiber tail, but there is a version called the marabou muddler, and a lot of people that's one of the more popular, probably more popular than the standard muddler, and that we'd use this for part of the wing. But the original used this is as modeled as I have for turkey quills, and um, then deer hair that can be spun, and squirrel tail, and then of course the chenille that I'm sorry, not the chenille, the mylar tinsel, flat mylar tinsel, and then the oval tinsel to rib it with. So go back to the vise. Just down just a tad. Okay. Now, because the head of this fly, grab a because the head of this fly and the collar takes up quite a bit at the front of the hook there. I'm going to start my thread back here a ways to keep me from using the front part of that hook. And I'm just going to lay down a base of thread. And then for the tail, when you look at a quill, you've got the side that has real long. Where are we here? There I am. You have the side that has the real long barbules, and then there's a short side. And for the tail, I like to use the short side. And the easiest way to get the right amount and to be consistent every time is to take same hook I'm using. I'm actually using a size 6, 3X long hook, by the way. I'm going to take that hook and just separate out a piece of the feather. That's the gap of the hook. And then I'll cut that loose. And then I'll take the other feather. I didn't really mention it, but these are opposing feathers. So if you lay them together with the dull sides facing each other, you've got the long fibers are on the same side. So I just took that off of this feather. So I'm going to come to the other feather and do the same thing. I'm going to measure. First, I want to look up here and make sure that all of these are married. Sometimes you get up here and the feather's a little damaged. I want to come down here. I've got good tips on there. So I want to measure a hook gap. on the short side there. And then I'll cut that loose from the stem. And now I've got these two pieces. So I'm going to put those together so their concave sides are facing each other and line up the tips. So that's going to be my tail section. About probably about a half a hook length past the bend. So let me get to the right point on the shank here. I want to be right to the end of the hook shank, which when I hang my thread, it's right there at the barb.
And you just keep it all as one unit for the thread, right? Or for the feather, right, Mike?
So this is the two pieces
Uh-huh.
that are stuck together, and I just keep them as one unit.
Okay.
Now, there's a couple different ways to do this. You can do a pinch wrap, which we showed in another other videos, where you pinch the thread, come down and come around the bottom, and then keeping a tight pinch on that feather, just pull straight up, and that should collapse that feather right on top of the hook shank. That's pretty good.
John or Mike, Mike is flashing in and out. He seems to be on speaker mode instead of spotlighted.
Yeah, Mike, can you spotlight yourself, please?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Make sure we're focused okay here. All right. So now I'm going to bring this forward up the hook shank. I can use spaced wraps until I'm almost to that original tie-in point, and I want to clip these off. And my thread. So if I hurry, start at the back here just to get that caught. Come forward, and I survived. Okay. So now I want to put in my pencil for the body. So I'm going to cut off a piece, maybe 6 to 8 inches anyway. And since this is gold on one side and silver on the other, I'm going to have the silver side facing out, so that when I start to wrap, the gold is going to fold over and the gold will be on the outside.
Did you forget to put the ribbing in, Mike?
I'll put that in now.
Okay.
Grab a piece of oval tinsel. And I'll try to keep that on the bottom, just so it doesn't wrap around and cause a curve in the shape of the body. Now I've got my rib, and it's on the lower back side of the hook. So that way it won't foul the tail when I wrap it. And then you can see as I start to wrap that tinsel, the gold side's to the outside since it folded over. I'll try to make touching tight turns, and you can see how using the base of that feather added a little bulk to the body. couple turns there. Clip it away. And then I'll take the oval tinsel and space wraps. Add a little flash and also to strengthen that mylar, that flat mylar. So that's the tail and the body. My tail got kind of skinny, but. So the next material is going to be gray squirrel tail. If you have possum, not Australian possum. No, not possum. Badger. I'm sorry. If you have badger hair, that's softer and it's pretty much the same exact markings as this. That can be used as a substitute. But squirrel tail is pretty easy to get a hold of. I'm going to cut a clump away. You don't want too much. And I'm going to grab it by the tips and then clean out all the junk. And then it's not too bad. I don't always stack it if it turns out to be pretty straight. I think I will give it a little bit of a stack here. I just put it in my hair stacker and give it a few taps. And that lines up all the tips. I'm going to take that about halfway down the tail. That's where I want it to be. I'm going to take that away and cut the butts. And then I'll tie those down real tight. And with a small amount of squirrel tail like that, you don't have to worry so much about it pulling out. I flared that quite a bit with real tight wraps. So if I come back over it with a couple fairly soft wraps, and that'll kind of hold that down a little bit. All right. The next part of the wing then is going to come back to these turkey quills. I'll try to zoom out a little bit here. So I was pretty close on that fly anyway. Maybe you can see these feathers a little better. So now I want to go to the long side of the feather. And again, I'll just grab that hook and just strip that loose. Sometimes it'll marry back to the other part, but usually it'll stay away from it a little bit. Cut that free. And I'll just set that on my bench. And then I'll grab the other feather and do the same thing. Cut that loose. And then with the curvature of this feather, they do splay out a little bit. That's okay. Now I can, looking at these, I can tell that the front feather is a little bit smaller than the other one, than the one in the back. So I'm going to reach around here so you can see what I'm doing, I guess. You can. I'm just going to grab those extra barbules, use the point of my hook to pull those up, and I can just strip those away. Now I have pretty equal wings. I'll make sure the tips are lined up. And then I want this to hang back a little bit past the squirrel, right about there. So I'll try to show you this other method and hopefully it'll work out okay. I'm going to go right back to the base of the squirrel there. And I'm still going to pinch that real tight with my thumb and forefinger. Bring it up and let the bobbin hang on that feather. Now, this works better with softer feathers than this. Turkey is a little bit thick. Maybe if I had a heavier bobbin, but the weight of the bobbin, if you hold that real tight, the weight of the bobbin will pull that and collapse it. And then as long as you're wrapping forward, you shouldn't twist that wing too much. Now that's another way of setting that wing. A couple more good wraps before I cut this off. And there's that. So now comes the messy part. So I usually do these in 2 steps, personally. I'll take my deer hair and just grab a section of it that I think is going to be enough for the collar. So separate it out, pull it up straight from the hide. And then if you can see that, you want to clip it as close as you can to the hide. So now what I have here, it's a little more hair than I want. And I've got all this under fur and small hairs in the base of it. I'm going to take that over my waste bin. And because I'm in Nebraska where it's humid, I can comb it out with a mustache comb. Get that to where they're all nice and clean. And then that looks like about the amount I would want. I'm going to put that in my hair stacker. And I took it out of my hair stacker so that the tips were pointing in the direction that I want to tie it on the fly. That way I won't have to flip it back and forth between my fingers to get it in the right direction. So I want my collar to be about, I want it to be maybe half that wing. And so that's about where I want it. So I'm going to just cut some of the length off of these tips, but I'm not going to cut it all the way back because this is going to give me some of the flared hair for the front part. So again, I'm going to measure that to about halfway down the wing. I'm going to place it on top. And I'm going to go all the way around and then pull straight up. And then I'm going to go through these hairs right here, work my way through them until I get past them. And then I'm going to let go. Now, I personally like a flatter bottom on my muddler. So how I want to do this collar is just take my thumb and just kind of work it a little bit where I get that collar about 180 on the hook there. You got to be kind of careful. So now I've got these other butts sticking up. I'm going to pull them back Make a couple wraps here. And then holding the back of the hook, I'm just going to kind of push a little bit and just give them a little bit of a snug. Now, I need to come forward a little bit. And then I'll grab another bunch of deer hair, maybe a little bit more than what I had before. I have about that much. They always say like a pencil width or whatever, but it's kind of hard to really judge the amount of hair. But I'm going to clean that out again. You want to get all that under fur out of there. So give it a good cleaning. Got quite a bit out of there. Now I'm going to take this. I've got those butts there. I'm going to cut them up here and I'm going to cut those tips off. So right about there. And then I'm going to take that hair. I'm going to kind of center it over my thread. Then I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 fairly soft wraps. And then I'm going to start to real steadily pull. And then you see how that rotates around. I'm holding the hook so I don't bend it. And I'm just tightly weaving that through now with tight wraps till I get up toward the eye. Now at this point, if I can get most of those out of the way, and to stay back, I'm going to go ahead and do a whip finish. And remove the thread. And now comes the fun part. So with my vise, see how far I can zoom out here. My trash bin actually attaches to my pedestal. So I can rotate it around underneath the fly like that if I want to. So I'm going to move it over there to make the least amount of mess as possible. So the first thing you want to do, again, I like my muddlers to be flat on the bottom. So just start working on the bottom. Make it flat. Now, another thing you can do, I've got it hidden by my, is if you take very carefully, don't try this at home, take a double-edged razor and break it in half. And then you can take that blade and bend it to do curved cuts, or you can use it flat to cut along the bottom. So I'm just kind of working to give me just that kind of round shaped head. I probably could have packed another bunch of deer hair. This is a fairly tightly packed head, actually. But using that razor blade, it's a good way. With scissors, it's kind of difficult to keep everything smooth. And you can usually go right up against that collar and not eat up too much of the collar. Now you notice, let me zoom out a little bit. Since this is kind of delicate work, I have my hand on the vise and I'm kind of putting my thumbs together to steady my hand. if your hands shake or even if they don't, it's just nice to have that hand be steady so you can do a little bit more delicate work without losing control.
The other thing you can do, Mike, and I've done this too with those heads, is you can use a lighter to sculpt it. If you use the lighter very carefully and you approach it from the top down. So you bring the lighter and light it up on the top of the head and then just bring it down slowly. And it'll actually let you sculpt that head with the flame.
Wow, that sounds dangerous for me. I think I would end up
Smells like
just
branding
rubbing
day at the ranch too.
it. Yeah, right. I'll bet.
Pretty much, yeah. I used to do it when my wife would be driving and I'd be sitting over there tying flies and I'd do it that way. I used to drive her crazy.
And
I'm
you're
just gonna
still
use-
married?
I bet. Yeah, 26 years today.
Well, no, that's why he's got to have a new kitchen going in.
Congratulations.
He was tying flies in the kitchen and his muddler caught on fire and ruined it. So now he has to put in a new kitchen. Okay. So that I'm going to call my muddler.
Beautiful.
How much time did we only ate up a half an hour? So maybe I will try to do that actually turned out pretty good. I might actually fish that one.
Yeah.
Any questions on this muddler before I move to the marabou muddler?
Yeah, the biggest problem I've always had with that has been the head, spinning the deer hair. I can remember it was the first fly that they taught us when I was taking it back in 1975 or 77. And I could never get that deer hair to spin. It always just wanted to stick right where it was. So
Wow, boy, I wouldn't do that I wouldn't do that to people for a beginner fly, I don't think.
yeah, but I was dumb and young and didn't know any better then. So I thought it was what everybody learned how to tie first. So
I'm going to do basically the same thing with the thread, except I'm not going to cut it this time. Or so I say. I'm actually, the only brown thread that I had loaded was that Semperfly 12-aught. Very, very strong, but no bulk at all. So I was afraid it was going to cut the deer hair, which I guess can happen with the real small threads that are very strong. I guess you can actually cut through the deer hair. But it turned out to not be a problem. So this time I'm going to do a marabou muddler. So I just have a red saddle hackle that I used for a fly several times ago. I still had it laying here on my bench. I'm going to strip, I think the best stuff is probably right down here. I'm going to just take some of this kind of marabou-y stuff off of there. And take these down here. They're nice and long. Try to get them about 90 degrees from the stem. And then pull the stem away. Now, when you bunch these together, sometimes the tips don't, get misaligned. You can take your finger and just tap on the butts. And that should align those fibers. That's actually a little bit too much. I'll pull some of that away. Off camera here. So I'm going to tie in a red tail. And I'll come back forward. And this time I'll tie the ribbing in first. So I have it started underneath, and then I'm holding the tinsel on the back side of the hook like that, and that keeps it underneath the hook. And then as I get back toward the back, I just kind of lift a little bit slightly, just so my rib is starting on the far side, maybe the lower far side of that hook. All right. Now back to the flat tinsel. It's better to use the large. If you try wrapping a body with the smaller, you get real frustrated. Another way you can tie it at the front and wrap all the way back. This tinsel is, the thickness of it is pretty insignificant, so you can actually tie it in right here at the back end. Give it a few good wraps, and that won't cause any bulk to throw off the shape of the body. Not any more than the butts from that tail, the tail fibers would. So go up to about there. And then I'll wrap the gold body in touching turns. Up over it a couple of times. Couple times on the shank, and then cut it loose. And I'll come forward with my rib. Now, I'm still going to put some squirrel tail. If you take your, this has kind of lost some of its flatness, but if you take your squirrel tail and you apply heat to it, like from a hair dryer, heat and the forced air, it'll take this tail and it'll flatten all of this out to the sides. So most of the hair is going to be right there at the ready. I think I need to give it another shot one of these days. I'm going to take, say about that much. Clip it close to the skin. This is actually lined up pretty good. I don't think I'll stack this one. So I'm going to go back at least half the tail. Go back about that far. So I'll mark it with my finger and thumb. Got the butts. And then very tightly cinch those down. Then I'll come back over it with some just kind of medium wraps, just to, whoops, splitting my thread there. I'm going to spin it. And then come with just some kind of medium wraps, just to more gently lay that squirrel tail down. That looks nice. I'm going to take some yellow marabou. Yellow, orange, white, and I think black are pretty much the common colors for these. I'm going to take, there's some off-color white stuff down here at the bottom. I'll strip that away. Some of this looks broken in here, so I think I'll focus on this side of the feather. Grab a pretty good clump. I also have some broken ones in there, but
So you
what I'm
strip
gonna
the marabou away from the feather, right, Mike?
So I have heard that if you pull the marabou away from the stem, then you have more of a chance of messing up your tips than if you hold the marabou and pull the stem away, that it's less of a chance to mess up the tips. I don't know if I've scientifically proven that or not. It makes sense to me. I want this to go almost to the end of that red tail, and I do have some broken tips in there, but I don't like how some of these tips of the marabou are very spiky. So I'm going to tie this in pretty much how it is. I'm going to clip the curly stuff from the base of it, and then right here at the base of my marabou, I'm going to start just kind of picking at that with my thumb and finger just to pull. See how I'm pulling all that fluff out? That's going to reduce the bulk at my tie-in point there. It's going to give me mostly just the stems. So I'm going to tie that in. I'm going to go too far forward. I need room to put my deer hair in. So I'm going to tie that down good. And then I'm going to come back here to the length I want the tail to be. And I'm going to press it with my thumbnail against my finger. And then just rip those ends loose. So then that gives you a more natural than if you just cut it. It gives you more natural, a little bit alternating. So it just gives it a better look. So there's my wing. Now I'll take, excuse me for bumping the camera there. Let me out a tad. I'm going to take a clump that I want for my collar, take it over the bin and clean it out. I showed you that waste bin is attached to the pedestal on my vise, the arm. I usually keep it off on the back side of the vise because it just tends to get in the way of hanging bobbins and different stuff when it's right below it.
I
So
ended up
that's-
using a jar
Pardon
lid.
me?
I used a jar lid. You know, I had a
Right.
little plastic jar lid, like from Mayo or something. In this case, it was
Right.
ice cream, stuffed it underneath there, and that seemed
Yep.
to kind of work.
I used to use like a lunch bag, just cut in half, so it's a little bit, not as tall. I used that for years, and then my daughter started decorating them, drawing little pictures on them and everything. So I don't have those anymore, but I'll tap those butts and I'll take them out of my stacker in the direction I want to have them. Again, I want my collar to maybe be that long right there. And then I want to kind of even these up so they're not so long. So when I tie them in, they can still serve as some of my stand-up hair for the head, but the real long ones just kind of tend to get in the way and cause trouble. I'm going to go back to the base of the wing there. Let me double check my length here. So that's about how long I want the collar. So I'll place that on top, go around it, and back up before I put any pressure. And then I'll pull straight up. Give it another wrap, and then I start going through the butts. Some of them are going down, but that's okay. Start working through those till you get to the front. Now my collar is pretty much on top. I can use my thumbnail to just kind of push it around to that side. Pretty good on this side. And then I'll take the rest of those, Fold them back. All right, now I'm going to come forward a little bit. If this is stealing terminology from Al Beatty. You don't want to try to spin your next group of hair against the wall, against this wall. If you have your thread right up tight against that and you try to spin it, it's not very likely to spin because it's going to have friction from the other hair and it's not going to have room. So you want to come forward to give you some hook shank there to allow that hair to spin. So grab another clump a little bit bigger. Clean all the junk out of it. Can, and then I don't really have to stack this because, but I do, my butts are fairly even right there. And then if I spin it around, I have those tips, and I don't want to confuse those with my collar, and they really don't need to be there. I'm just going to cut those off. And I'll pretty much center that on where my thread is. I'll come over again, and over again. You can tell by the hair I'm not pushing on it at all. I'm just doing 3 wraps. So now I'll hold my spool so it doesn't spin, so I can pull real tight and steady. And then if it doesn't spin, just keep wrapping. And then sometimes you have to actually give it a little bit of a spin. I think because of I had some of my wing material was a little bit far forward. I think that's why that didn't spin very well that time. But work your way through those hairs. Come to the front. See if I can pack that at all. Not really. I'll do a tiny bit more. Just a tiny bit more in the front. And then I'll whip finish. Got the thread. Move my waist bin over so it doesn't end up all over the house. That blade was working pretty good. I'll give that another shot here. If you have a good serrated scissors, that works real good for this. Normal fly tying scissors, usually the hair slips out. And you also have to have a pretty good sharp razor blade. If it's pretty dull, you're gonna have a little trouble with cutting the hair. So when you want that cone shape, that rounded shape, I forget who did it this way, but you want it to kind of taper from the eye out, you know, off in this direction, kind of at an angle. So take it on this side, and from the eye, with a little bit of an angle, make a cut. I mean, on that plane, it's just not working. Try the other side of that blade. There we go. Cut that
I'm
Then come to
surprised
the
that
top. Pardon me?
surprised they don't make a tool for that so you could have adjustable like curvature and everything.
Right.
Kinda like a groomer.
And then come to this side. Do it. Now, if you take those corners off, that'll give you that rounded shape. Take that corner off. Take that corner off. Now you have a pretty rounded shape. Few of those butts. Sometimes you can actually pull them too. Just break them loose. Down here. You just pull them. That's not as pretty of a head. I got a little aggressive on my butts there. But it is a little bit of a bulk there for the head. And that deer hair will help it suspend a little bit in the water column. And there we go. There's a marabou muddler. A little easier on the wing and the tail, but you still have to do the deer hair.
Very nice.
Beautiful.
I still have trouble with those deer hair, spinning that deer hair.
It's if you can practice the I don't think I have them handy. I have some.
I think the problem I have is I use the wrong kind of deer hair. Al's got there's a
Right.
certain place on the deer that's best for spinning, and then another part that's best for the wing. Al can
So
What-
if you look at the clump of deer hair, yeah, this is fairly light in color. So that just figures that this hair is from down the side of the deer, and not up along the backbone. If it was up along the backbone, these tips would be a lot darker.
yeah.
From about halfway up, you'd have real dark, like from about halfway up.
That piece you
That'd
got
be
there,
real-
Mike, is good spinning hair. Real
Right.
good spinning hair.
And the best spinning hair of all is from the belly, which is white. A lot of the stuff they use for the fancy bass bugs is white hair that's dyed different colors. The white hair, you can make a real vibrant red or yellow or green or different
Yeah,
colors.
yeah.
And so that's also the most hollow hair and the stuff that'll really flare nicely. It's bigger around. So when you're sculpting it, it really makes it look nice.